All right, welcome everybody to the first inaugural pilot episode in that particular stream and that particular kind of form of content, because you can do pretty much anything, right? So what drove you to that?
That's a wonderful question, and to answer that, I think there's a few spots in my history of just doing this sort of thing that kind of point to what became Crossing the Streams. Um, More recently, before the show started, I did a charity stream for like some of us crazy creators did. I did like a marathon stream for almost like, I think it was 25 hours actually.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
a
and
lot.
I
That's a
built
lot.
I built that was me building the Titanic set. And I realized that there's no better way to do a long stream than to invite friends to join me. And so I invited a lot of the friends in the Lego community that I had made at the time, felt the most comfortable chatting with and talking to. So Panfred Nudo, AZ Pinoy, Amish Ace. I invited them to just come hang out. I told them there's no obligation.
Please keep me
If
awake.
you want to, yeah, just keep me entertained and awake, and so I did that. Had them on, one by one. Sometimes a couple of them overlapped, but they would come in at different time slots, and we would just chat. And naturally, I just wanted to know more about their history, and so I started asking them questions about Lego and about Twitch, and some of the things that you would expect on an episode of Crossing the Streams just kind of came up. And so that was kind of the most immediate precursor to what became Crossing the Streams. And so coming out of all that, I spoke to Fred Nudo, and said, I really enjoyed that. That was really great. I have a wacky idea. Do you think this is something that I should do on the regular? And Fred was like, dude, I'm surprised you don't do that. Like, yes, you should do it. And so that's the short version of the story. There are other things I've done beforehand that kind of led up to me being able to do this. A lot of other experiments and projects that I've done that, if you look at it, it shares a lot of the same DNA that became Crossing the Streams. So
Such as,
but
like, what
yes,
can you point to
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that?
I did I want to say an 8-episode miniseries called Creator Canon. And probably very few people have seen it, except for the people that were on it and some family and friends. It was a podcast, and it was far more structured. It was me figuring out podcasting. And this was, I want to say, just before the pandemic. This was me in the middle, which we'll probably get to more later, on a break from Twitch specifically. And I wanted to still make things. And so I was like, still interested in creativity, still interested in creators. And so I invited friends that did different things that were creative. So one friend's a YouTuber, another one's a musician, another's a blogger. So as a creator canon, and canon like CANON, like the story of the creator.
Yes.
And so it was a very small series of me navigating what it meant to be a creative in these different subsections of types of ways you can produce things. And so that kind of served an underlying purpose of me figuring out how to kind of do this, the discussions that revolve around creativity. Like I said, I did like a short 8-episode run of it. And actually, I recorded like 10 of them, and 2 of them just kind of between recording issues and just like having technical difficulties, because I was
some of
figuring it out.
those learning process issues.
Yeah. Only 8 of them were really like completely usable, and so it's out there. Like, people can find it, but it's very like, no one really knows about it. It was like me walking before I could even run.
Yeah, it's like a personal project kind of made public, because that's how it works. But I find it super interesting that you kind of took a break from one creative space, but that kind of creative drive was still there. Now I know you're a game designer, kind of quote unquote in real life, which we can get to, but so obviously that creative element is a big part of you. Has it always been like that?
It has always been a part of me, but I never really embraced it until my 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 early adulthood, actually fresh out of college, which is kind of ironic because you spend all this time trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, figuring out where you want to be and what you want to do when you grow up. And then you're kind of thrust into the world, kind of starting towards that path of what do I want to do with my life. And I never really paid as much attention to it until I was out in the real world doing it on my own time.
Yeah.
Like outside of my professional career at the time. So yeah.
That's interesting because it all seems that everything came together fairly organically from getting to crossing the streams from a couple of kind of random or not so random kind of occurrences that you decided to do that kind of tapped into this creative space and ended up being something more polished over time into crossing the streams. So you start this podcast, and what did success look like to you when you first got started? Like you asked Fred, like you said, I'm gonna ask Fred, he's a friend of mine, should I do this? Go ahead, I think it'll be great. But what does that look like to you when you're getting started? Did you have goals? Did you have an idea of what it might look like? Did you think you were gonna get to 50 episodes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly did not think I would get to 50 episodes at all, honestly. It was very much, we will try to do 5 and see where it goes. And I already had the prior experience of Creator Canon in the back of my head. I was like, this might not go on any longer. And to kind of speak quickly to Creator Canon, it's not that I didn't want to keep doing it or I felt it wasn't successful. It was more of I was trying to understand, it was always a short-term project in my head to kind of figure out how to explore a different type of medium, which is podcasting. And so when I sat down to do Crossing the Streams, I told myself, okay, this is an opportunity to work on some skills. And that was a couple different skills, primarily being able to take something like live stream and turn it into more evergreen content as a consumable piece of media that could live apart from Twitch.
Yeah, even though evergreen Twitch content is a clip. It's like, 10 seconds or less or whatever it is, right? So you're taking it and kind of merging two very different mediums or trying to make one work with the other.
Absolutely. It was an opportunity for me to see if I can make that happen, because you hear about creators who do this and there's very few of them who do it well, and there's very few of them that even make something out of it. And so I saw this as an opportunity, as like, if anything, this is a chance to just improve my ability to take something that is live and turn it into something that can be found anytime, anywhere on YouTube and on podcast platforms. And I know I kind of cheat that in a slight way because we record it live. It's not as engaging as your traditional live stream, but it's still done in real time. The audience can still contribute. We still do find out, if there's something that happens in the chat, we stop and we talk about it. So
there can still be some comments and things that come up that drive part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was no real long-term goal beyond what can I learn in 5 episodes? What can I make happen in that time? And what I did do differently than Creator Canon was I want to see what happens after 5 episodes and decide if I want to keep going.
Oh, okay.
So 5 episodes happened, and then 10 episodes happened, and then right around the 10 episode mark, I was like, okay, this feels good. I really enjoy doing this. I'm learning a lot from other creators because really, I did see it as an opportunity to do this form of content creation. But more importantly, and at the heart of it, the goal of the show is to get stories from other creators and learn about them, and hopefully inspire others, including myself, on continuing the path of creating something. And as I got further and further along, and I say this all the time on my show, everyone has a story, everyone has something that I can learn from. And I just decided that, okay, I'll do another, like I hit 10 episodes, I'll do another 10. Yeah. Oh wow, I'm at 20. I'm gonna shoot for another like 5 and go for 25. And then I got to 25. I was like, let's make it a solid 50 and see if we can make that happen. And that's kind of where I ended up with it.
I love though that your focus was not on like the outcome of I'm gonna make X number of episodes or I'm gonna do this with the channel. It's the process of discovery on your own, as well as the discovery of the stories you're trying to learn about, and like you said, you invited first streamers you already knew and were friends with, but there were for sure still stories you didn't know yet or hadn't heard yet that you got to dig into through that process. So when discussing goals and goal setting, like it's so important to not just focus on the outcome, because there's only one outcome, and if you set that one bar too high, it's just failure. But if you focus on your process, you can find little victories and little growth and little ways to celebrate, between then and the big milestone. Then you mentioned that, like 5, then 10, then 20. How far can I go?
Yeah, it was never this this is going to be something that I do for 100 episodes or whatever that might be, or I'm doing this to be wildly known in the podcast world. It was really, how can I take this and build some skills? So there were like on the skill side of things, I was like, I want to get better at generating evergreen content, which included video editing skills on the technical side of things, as well as just being a better conversationalist and creating something that would feel like a natural way to tell a story or tell someone else's story. And so I always felt like I was pretty good at that sort of thing. I enjoy having a great dialogue with someone, but I felt like this was an opportunity to really exercise that skill and get even better at it. And so and I'll admit, man, if you look at episode 53, which is the latest episode, and you compare it to episode 1, there has definitely been a marked improvement in terms of everything, whether it's the production value, but also just my ability to converse with someone about what they do.
And so, if there wasn't, you probably would have quit long before that.
Oh yeah,
right?
probably. Yeah.
No, that's great. Like, so did you, at what point did you kind of go back and look at some of those older ones? Did you review some of the early streams and be like, oh wow, I've come so far? Or were you critical of it and looking back early on and said, okay, well, I can improve in this area? Were you that committed each time? Or was it just a process through the editing, you got to see things and pick up on small things you could improve? How did that progress go?
Yeah, when I first started, and for those that probably don't really know the content as well, you'll notice over the first couple of episodes, the editing was very, very light. It was very much, I'd clip off the front and the end, everything before and after. If there was something weird that happened in the middle, I would cut that out, and that would be it. And it was very lightly edited. That was mostly because of my personal thought of, well, I need to practice, and I'll practice with the easy stuff, right? And so
start there.
Start there. A couple episodes. So I went through and I would listen to them and watch them in real time at least once after the fact, because I would be looking for the edits. And so I would go through an episode and I would catch something that I'm like, this could have been done better, right? Maybe I asked a question and I could have phrased it a little differently, or there was I know early on in a couple of those episodes, I remember thinking to myself, oh, there would have been a great follow-up there that I could have totally gone with. Didn't do it because I was, I think, so focused on just trying to get to other things.
I've got my script here.
Right,
and
I
I
got my
missed an opportunity
questions.
to, yeah.
Exactly. And so over time, I started just making notes over the first couple episodes of like things that I want to do better. And the whole goal around it was how can I just get a little bit better at this, whether it was the way I phrased a question, the way I would look for a follow-up, the way I would edit something. And then, like I said, it was very lightly edited. And then if you follow the story of the edits over the next several episodes, you learn that I got more heavy-handed with the editing, kind of trying to find my place with how I would do it. And I think I over-edited in a couple episodes where it's like, oh man, just felt maybe too edited.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have been working on the technical level how to improve that. But I was always, because I was so keen on trying to figure out that process, it forced me to rewatch those episodes at least once or twice each. And so I would notice something that I would say, or something in the flow of the conversation, or something that the guest said that I could have easily followed up on that would have been a great direction to go. And I just made notes. And then I would sit down for the next episode and I would say, like, here's my bulleted point of list of things that I wanted to do differently or better. And then I would see myself do it in the next edit and be like, yeah, that was pretty good. Or man, that was a bad experiment. Don't ever do that again. And so, but basically just seeing it evolve was a very, like you said, it was a very organic process. And it was the whole idea of trying to just get a little better, just little things I could do to improve it every time. And there would be spans of 2 or 3 episodes where you like, if you're paying attention, you see me try something a little differently, and then maybe it gets incorporated for like the rest of the like episodes after
it
that.
Starts to happen,
or maybe
like your what was it, your grilled cheese question, like that for sure wasn't in the first episode,
No.
like...
No, that's just actually, that what's so funny in the context for that is we always ask the grilled cheese question after we record the episode proper. But Yagi over in the chat, another creator here on Twitch, he would ask the question, when you make grilled cheese, do you prefer butter or mayo when you grill it? Does it go on the outside when you go to grill the bread? And the first couple times I laughed, me and the guests would laugh at it, and then next thing you know, it's a fixture of like the post show. And it's actually, my plan is to do a supercut of all the answers every time, because I think we've probably asked it like 30 times at least on the show.
You can, and that becomes some content for like your Instagram and your support social media things.
Absolutely,
that question supercut would be great. And it's interesting hearing you talk about all that. Obviously, this being my first episode, and I'm going to find out very quickly, do I enjoy doing that editing? Is that something that's going to take me away from this if I enjoy the interview and the chatting, but then the editing becomes okay. And that's part of the process for me too, and even for you, I guess, when you started, that process of discovery is so important when you're starting something new. Is, what am I gonna like best? What am I gonna maybe not like so much? Am I gonna make it, like you said, to 5 episodes, 10 episodes, because of some of these things, regardless of having guests lined up? Like, if I do this for a month and it's, I'm just not enjoying it, well, we'll go try something else, I guess, Did you ever have any of those where you're like, I think I'm gonna stop? You're at 53, you said, right? 53 episodes.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment where you were frustrated for whatever reason, and you were kind of like, I don't think I'm going to keep doing this, or I need to take a week off, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of us end up in that moment where we were just not sure about doing it, right? About continuing to make it. And what's really interesting is I kind of felt that way when doing streaming in general. It was very much of, I could really use a break, or at the lowest of lows is like, should I continue to do this? Is this something that I would really want to continue doing? Does this like I think even at my lowest points, I would say to myself, I do enjoy doing this, but is this something that is really meaningful for other people? Because I think I have this weird perception, at least I did. I have it less so now, of, am I wasting people's time? Am I wasting the guests' time, right? Like, especially the guests. Like, am I dragging them onto this show where maybe no one really cares, and not about them, but about the fact that I'm doing this thing. And for me, even in those moments, those lowest moments, I would still find a way to do it. And what was really interesting was those 50 episodes were fairly contiguous in terms of their recording. I think barring holidays or like any major things that would prevent me from recording on a Saturday, it would happen, and then it would get edited and it would go up. So there were very few breaks, even when I would stop streaming other things. Like, I would take maybe 2 weeks off from streaming Lego or games, but crossing the streams would still happen.
So that's almost like if you prioritize the content you're creating right now, that's your number one priority outside of work, in terms of the content creation part of things. So if you have to sacrifice a stream for the week, it's going to be a Lego building stream, not a Crossing the Streams episode, barring sickness or, like you said, a holiday maybe or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting to me, because it like you said when you started, it kind of came out of not nothing, but it came out of the blue, kind of just, maybe this is an idea that could work, and it became over time, over the course of a year plus, the main thing in terms of your content creation.
Yeah, it did. And even when I needed a break, I felt like I needed to take some time, I still felt compelled to do it. I still would think about, I'm really busy, or I'm feeling like things are really hectic right now, but I got 2 hours this week to record an episode. I can still make an episode happen.
I can make something
happen. Yeah, I still have 2 hours after that, or 3, to edit it and post it. And so that kind of became my bare minimum. That became my normal. Even if I didn't feel like doing anything else, I still felt like there was value there. And I would still, even feeling kind of like crappy about maybe where I was in my own personal creating journey, I would think about the moments post recording, which for me is always just a positive feeling. This sounds, I don't want to sound cliche, but it is very inspiring when I get out of a recording session with someone, because I learn a little bit about that person. I find out where they come from. I get a little glimpse of what they feel when it comes to making stuff. And it inspires me. It makes me go, you know what? That was great. Like even in the moments where I wasn't feeling the greatest about my own creation, I was feeling awesome about hearing someone else talk about it. And so the longest break Crossing the Streams took was about 6-7 weeks. And that was me just actually reassessing the whole 50 episodes that I recorded.
That was right after your 50th episode, right? That you took a break.
That was right after it was right after my 50th episode. I did say to myself and the community that I'm going to take a break. I don't know for how long, but it's not because I don't want to do more. It's because I feel like after doing a year's worth of shows, I kind of owe it to myself to figure out what comes next.
Of course.
And so I said, I don't know how long that's going to be. Could be a week, could be several. And it ended up being like 6 or 7 weeks. And it was really me watching full episodes and figuring out, like, what happens next? Where does this go? Because I do feel like I also don't want it to be stale, right? I don't want to do another 50 episodes of the same sort of thing. So yeah,
how do you keep it fresh? How do you change things up without losing the core intent of the storytelling journey you're on? And it's interesting to me now that you had that kind of reassessment. what what is success for the stream now, for the podcast now? Originally, it was just to learn and grow in some of these technical
Mm-hmm.
things and get to 5 and then get to 10. Now you're at
Yeah.
50 plus. Technically, you know, I've obviously learned the editing thing compared to when you first started. Some of those first early learning curve problems are done with.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does success with the podcast look like for you now in terms of goals or
Yeah.
evaluative processes that you have for the next year or so?
Yeah. So the thing that stays the same is how can I incrementally get better, even though the curve is far more it's not as steep as it used to be, right? I've learned all the like basic skills to get me there. I definitely can get better at a lot of things, and so that's really, from a core perspective, that part of it stays the same. How can I get better every episode? And then the longer term goal now for success is really, how can I not just get the stories and inspiration that I've always been after with every person, with every episode, but how can I help those people and every person that has been on the show? How can I help them reach that potential that they see in their own streams or content, right? And so I know that's more of a loosey-goosey answer or even goal, but honestly, it starts with creating awareness around the show and getting people's stories out there more. And so my biggest thing coming out of the break was, and this is me continuing to test my skills and my limits, is, okay, I've got podcast episodes down, I got YouTube videos down. Let's try to master short form. And so for those that do follow me on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, you will have seen a massive influx of about 40 clips that have been posted over the last month. And that is now me trying to take that next step. Like, how do I build content for short form? Because ideally that will grow awareness around the show, which will then grow awareness for everyone who is on the show. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned too, helping others, and this kind of goes hand in hand because 2 different comments you've made has been about, helping others achieve their goals, but also, you yourself feeling energized and the value that you have intrinsically and after each kind of show, after each interview. And I would say, just from my limited experience, that you're already having a positive impact on your guests because of the energy you bring, and I would argue that they probably have the same energizing feeling after a show with you as you have, chatting with them. And that is, I mean, like we said, as the show was starting, like, this show is inspired a great deal by, if he can do that, I'm not going to do the exact same thing, but that makes me want to do this, so that's huge. I think you're doing that already without even trying, and now that you're making a conscious effort for it, I can only see it getting better.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, that I think it's really me trying to externalize the feelings that I get from it. I want people who are like on the show or who watch the show to walk away with that same feeling that I do, which is, man, that was really cool to hear that story. It was really great to learn more about this person. I understand them a little bit more for whatever reasons that have come up in that conversation. And then maybe that next step is, I also feel inspired to make something great, whatever that is, right? If it's as straightforward as their own stream, their own podcast, great. If it's something where they want to just get better at a thing that they want to do that is creatively at the core, great. Then that the show has served a hopefully the purpose that it's been, in my opinion, meant to do.
For sure, and it's one of those where it's hard to gauge that necessarily. You don't always see the impact you have beyond, your brief time, so to speak, chatting with someone. Even as a streamer, even if you follow their streaming activity, it's hard to gauge exactly what kind of influence you had. In that aspect, it's not unlike coaching, where you've had some potential influence there, you just don't know how much, and maybe you really had none, you don't know, but you feel like you've done something or contributed in some way.
Yeah.
So stepping away from the content creation side of things, you're a game designer kind of in real life.
Yes.
I don't like using the in real life expression, like the IRL friends and the online friends. I don't quite like that, but it's an accepted way of discussing it. So so how do you find that balance between kind of the work and I hesitate to call it play, because there's a fun element to it, but there's also a lot of personal growth and work that goes into the podcasting. So where do you find that balance?
It is a continuous work in progress, and it is never going to look the same week to week. I think that's the key, or day to day even. And so I work, it's a full-time job. The game development is a full-time job. Sometimes it's 40 hours, sometimes it's 50 or 60, depending on what's going on. And so that means, because it's a priority, that is the focus, is to work and do the thing that I do by day, so I can take care of myself and my family. And then of course my family is the other thing, and then whatever's left goes to a combination of the content creation, so crossing the streams, other streams, as well as just my own mental health. And so honestly, of course, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, the mental health part takes priority before even that other stuff. And so it's really, by the end of the day, after I've satisfied my work requirements, which sounds so clinical in a way that I don't want it to sound, because I love my job. I love game development. I love being a creative in that industry. I'm working my dream job. I feel very fulfilled there, but put in the time during the day. When that is done, I take care of myself and I take care of my family, and then whatever's left at the end of the day goes into these other things. And if there's a day where there's no room for that, I have made a point not to beat myself up about it. And it's taken many years to get to that point. There are days where I still consider myself a little, stressed out because of that stuff, but I try to make a point not to focus on it, because I gotta do all these other things first. And the balance is really hard. It's really tough. And I think as things continue, I have to leave myself that room to either relax or not think about anything other than just whatever it'll take for me to feel good about things at the end of the day. So if crossing the streams work doesn't happen, barring a recording, right? I generally will set it aside and not think about it until I can, which might be the next day or a day after that.
Yeah, so you're trying to let yourself get feeling guilty about not getting that work done. When there just wasn't time for it, you only have so much bandwidth. So I'm curious, as a creator, and this comes back to, I remember one of the great comments, and it might have been on a Crossing the Streams episode, it might have been one of his own streams, another kind of formerly Lego based, not doing Lego anymore on stream, creator Bricks O'Brien talked about how to a certain extent, everything can be content, right? And he actually stopped doing Lego on stream specifically because he wanted to reclaim that as his hobby and not part of the content creation as his job. Now, to an extent, game design, I would imagine, can be looked at as content creation in the sense of you're creating things. It's not the typical content we think of as Twitch and social media content, but it's still, you're creating something, So what do you do, and how do you find that balance with, some of your hobbies, Lego and other things, might be part of the content on Twitch? And where does it kind of cross the line from hobby and self-care to work ish type thing when you're creating content on Twitch with it?
Yeah, so there's definitely moments where I will find that, and I think as a content creator on Twitch, a lot of us think this way. Something happens and we think to ourselves, oh, that would be a great stream. Or that would be a great video. It'd be really cool to share this on stream tonight or tomorrow. And like you referenced Bricks O'Brien saying, I want to reclaim this hobby for myself. I think it's important for creators to realize that line of, am I doing this because it makes good content? And or am I doing this because I still get joy out of it? Because ultimately, most streamers and content creators start this as a hobby. And so only if you maybe see growth in it, you decide you want to apply yourself more. And that's when you kind of get into that grind of like, I want to be a Twitch, like I want to be a partner, or I want to be this or that. Go full time, right? And that's awesome. But when you start to lose that passion, it really requires you to really examine your motives and what fulfills you and where that joy can come from, right? And so for me, even though I stream Lego, actually I haven't streamed Lego on channel in like almost a month, maybe longer. I have, not unlike Bricks O'Brien, I've reclaimed things to do in my spare time that I almost consider, I consider it in a way taking care of myself on a mental health level, right? Where it's like, oh, I really want to build this Lego set. I built tons of Lego in the last month, just not on stream.
Exactly.
Yeah, I play a ton of games when I have time, an hour here, an hour there, just not on stream. And honestly, it allows me to better approach some of these other things that I'm doing, whether it's talking, like it can still technically be content. I can talk about it on stream later, but it's really me just enjoying it for what it is and not pressuring myself to actually do something, right? Because things start to lose value when you start applying pressure to yourself to produce content out of it. And I found that very quickly, if you apply that to everything, then everything does not become as fun, because then you're worrying about how do I frame this in this video? How do I talk about this as a feature in this stream? Like it becomes work almost. And so
it reminds me,
a point not to.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
you're
done.
But it reminds me of the story, and you might have heard that it's like kind of one of those, I don't know what to call it. It's not like a fable, but it's basically a story of, a man who's living in an apartment building, and there's kids, young adults living in the same building, and all they do is make noise and keep him up at all hours and make all kinds of racket in the hallways and so on. And he complains and complains and complains, and they don't stop. And so what he does is he takes the kids aside and he decides he's going to give them, $5 to make as much noise as they can that night. And then he's going to give them $5 the next night to make as much noise as they can. And they do it for a week. And then at the end of the week, he says, I'm sorry, I don't have any money. I can't pay you anymore. And all of a sudden they don't want to do it. So they're quiet.
Right.
And he's achieved his goal of peace and quiet, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that, where it's if every hobby is becomes content, becomes something you're doing for the purpose of sharing with everybody, it becomes harder to get that line of, am I really enjoying this for myself anymore? You know, and I think you touched on it. I think every content creator to a certain extent has to find that line somewhere, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
So in your in your career, we've talked about like success as a podcaster. In your career, you know, you've mentioned 40, 50, 60-hour weeks. I'm sure there's crunch time with game design where, you know, you have deadlines to meet and so on. Are you as kind of internally motivated as you are with your podcasts, or is it really a lot of, it's you said it's kind of a dream job, but it's still a lot of external like deadlines and hard, you know, work flow that you have to manage in terms of how you gauge if you're being successful at your job?
Yeah. With my job, obviously, it's a little different in that I know that there's more at stake, right? Because if I do choose for some reason to skip crossing the streams, like, it's not going to affect my ability to eat. Or, you know, it's not going to put me in a place where I'm stressed out about not being able to keep my job. Not that that's the case at my job. I mean, I feel awesome about my job, and I know that they feel awesome about me. But knowing that it's a core part of what I'm supposed to be doing does have some bearing on how I address it. Now, does that mean I can't enjoy it or find the things that I think are as fulfilling in it? I still do, and I think I actively make a point to, because it makes the work better. Honestly, the nature of the work that I do, we sometimes work on games or we co-develop projects on properties that we aren't necessarily, you know, it's not always an original IP of our own. So sometimes we work with other people's ideas and concepts, which means you almost have to find things to really love about that work.
Because it wasn't yours that you developed, it's somebody else's. Yeah.
Right. And for me, and maybe this is why I even approach crossing the streams the way I do, is early on in my career, I worked on a game that was totally not in my realm of comfort. And I'm not even afraid to talk about it. It's so long ago. Dancing with the Stars, a Facebook game. No joke. And so I was a fresh designer, maybe almost a year and a half into my career. I got to work on some cool projects before that were more my jam, like Deadliest Warrior, or even like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune.
So, game show style.
Yeah, so I was like, cool, you know, it's great. And then I got put on Dancing with the Stars, and I was like, yo, this is not my jam normally. And you know, and everyone in the room knew that. Everyone in the room knew this was something that we took because, I mean, as a company, we thought it was a good fit, which is true. It was a good fit for us. But being the designer, it was timing and skill set. I was the best person for it. And so it's like, all right, I'll do it. And I think that was a turning point for me, because this is very indicative of some of the work that I would end up doing later in my career, of getting involved with something that I personally maybe not am super stoked about, but I want to do a good job and I want to be a good game designer. And
taking ownership of it, even though it's not technically yours.
Absolutely. I wanted, because my name still goes in the credits. My name still is on the box or whatever it is. Like, my name is still attached to it. And I think I took a personal, it was a personal pride thing. It was a personal, I was like, you know what? This is going to be the best damn Dancing with the Stars game it's going to be. And so early on in pre-production, when we were trying to even figure out what the game was going to be, I developed a system that I'm still proud of to this day after almost 12 years in the industry. And the short version of it is we created a system. This was supposed to be a social Facebook game, by the way. So we were very limited in what we could achieve. But The system was what would be compelling for people to play on as a Facebook game on a regular basis. Oh, you could like build dances like the Dancing with the Stars choreographers would do.
Okay.
And so from a design level, for me, it was very fascinating that I could create a unique system that would be actually under the hood super interesting. And maybe someone in game development would find that very intriguing. But on the surface level, it's just, oh, cool, you can make your own dances. That's kind of neat. Yeah. But what went into the work was we teamed up with choreographers from Dancing with the Stars, and I pitched this idea to them. They said, would it be possible to choreograph dances that we could capture in real time, motion capture, and translate that in such a way that would allow people to build dances with on their own,
like an 8 count or a 16 count or whatever of this move, and then add that and then add that.
Yeah, and so it was an interesting design problem. It was a super interesting design problem to solve for, and that's where I found my passion for that game. Even though I wasn't a big fan of the show, or I wasn't a big fan of the subject matter.
Hey, those dancing shows were hot for a while.
They were. It was super hot at the time. It was a home run, I think, for us at the time. But honestly, and yeah, I watched a ton of Dancing with the Stars at the time. I went to a live filming of it as part of the work. And so, and what I came out of that was I built a system that was super interesting in that we took over, I want to say, 100 some different dance moves, individual dance moves, just like a little move here, a little move there, and we built them in such a way in partnership with this choreographer that a lot of them would lead into the next,
like
they could sync up with another move, right? And think about it like the perfect GIF loop, or think about the perfect
which is
TikTok
like
loop.
So hard,
Right, is how you can make one dance move end and blend into the next move. And so that was really cool. Getting that was super awesome, especially as a rookie game designer. And then being able to put that in a game, I worked really closely with the animation team to make it look awesome. But then our UI artist, we came up with a system where when you put these dances in our we made a timeline editor. When you put them in, you drop these dance moves in, and they would look like puzzle pieces. So you could just drop them on top of each other, and then you could hit play, and they would do this whole dance sequence that was animated already.
Wow!
And it was pretty fascinating to me. But the moral of the story for me was finding the thing that makes me super passionate about it, and I still try to do that to this day. And granted, I'll admit, over the last several years, I've had way more projects that are way more my jam anyway. But finding those things that interest me and make me feel fulfilled, whether it's as simple as making me better at my craft, which is how, to some degree, Crossing the Stream started out, whether it's making me better at that, or just finding something interesting that I could learn from that project. And I carry that with everything that I do in game development. And 12 years later, 16, 17 different games, I continue to do so. So
that's amazing. I mean, that's a really cool first of all, a really cool story of how that game kind of came to be, and how you found something to be passionate about within it, like in your role of developing that game. Like you said, for something that wouldn't typically be your jam in terms of the game itself, were there ever like some struggles you had like in that same situation, or even in stuff that was more your jam, where you couldn't find the passion, or you struggled to get the inspiration you needed to really do your best work?
Yeah, that happens. I've been there. I've certainly been in those moments, and sometimes it's a factor of maybe there's just not a great fit, or maybe there's just not a thing that I can find myself being passionate about. Those are the times where it requires a lot more patience from myself, probably even my team, but like mostly myself, and really digging. I hate to say the phrase digging down deep, but like I would have to reflect a lot on like what can I do to still make something awesome. And for me, it comes down to that, where it's like, and I said this earlier, and I say this occasionally to my team, like my name is still on it, so I still want it to represent my skill as a developer and the design of someone who cares about the game.
Yeah, it's funny that in that answer, you reminded me of two quotes, like from books that I've read, and one was, a lot of people have heard now of Grit, Angela Duckworth's book about grit, and as a factor for success in whatever you're doing. But another author came out and said essentially fit looks like grit. So like if you happen to find something that is a good fit for you, it's easy to be gritty about that particular thing. So it's easy to get the work done when it fits with whatever it is. So even in the case of a game where on the surface, the Dancing with the Stars game, it doesn't feel like it's a fit with you, you found something that did fit with your motivations at the time, especially being a rookie designer, having this really cool project. You got to learn a lot and do a lot of different things, that you've carried forward in your career. And it makes me think of how what you said earlier, finding the thing that you can sink your teeth into, it does get challenging sometimes, I guess it doesn't matter what the job is, where you get handed tasks, here, do this, and not all those tasks would be things you'd necessarily want to do, and that brings me to the second quote that kind of, it was more about writing than pure creation of like content and stuff, but it was that inspiration had better find you working. So like, even if you don't want to do something, you can't just slack off. You need to be working on it, and then when inspiration does strike, you're there and you're able to capitalize on it, if you're like, for lack of a better term, half-assing it, and then inspiration won't ever come, to get the best you can out of a project.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it does get hard sometimes, because either it's just not something that feels great, or it's a content that you're just not excited about. But then that's where you really have to figure out, okay, what's in front of me? How can I own this and still feel great about what's produced? And I think that's usually what I end up going back to when I'm in a situation where it's not ideal, or it's not something that I'm actively excited about. I have to look for those little wins, right? Whether it's coming up with a really cool dance system, or or it's sneaking in little things of my own into a game that probably wouldn't necessarily appreciate some of the things. That sounds bad the way I put it. I worked on a
that's not the best.
I worked on a children's MMO where it was primarily like edutainment.
Okay.
And, it's an awesome game, but there was a lot of restriction in some of the things that you could do. And I kid you not, someone said, why is this in here? Like, I put a thing in, like I was doing some level in quest design in it, and they're like, why is this here? I was like, oh, I just thought it'd be a fun little touch. Right? Like, it'd be really great. The librarian was too short in this MMO. She's a short woman in this MMO, and I thought it'd be clever to build a stack of books behind the counter and then put her on top of the stack of books so the children could see her. And that was just a decision that I made. The task was simply put her behind the counter, and I'm like, her head barely poked above the counter, and for whatever reason, that was what was decided. I wasn't part of the character design on that character. So I was like, I'm just going to put her on a stack of books because it's whimsical and it's fun.
Yeah, and did they keep that?
In a build review, they were they questioned it a lot. They're like, why is this here? It's kind of not the thing we're going for. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That's okay. but I would continue to do little things. I kind of went a little rogue, where I would just find little things that made me smile. I mean, this is a kid's game, right? And so I was trying to find little things that maybe a player, like a younger player, would find funny or just enjoy.
Little funny Easter eggs or little funny things.
Little funny Easter eggs. And even things like that, I was on that project for a long time, and I found plenty of things to do. That wasn't, and in fact, I could have just not done any of that and be done with my day, but I would take the time and do stuff like that. And honestly, a lot of the fun in games is the detail, is the little things you don't notice right away, or something that you run by in a game a bunch of times and you're like, that's a funny little detail I never noticed. That's really great that someone took the time to think about that. That's the stuff that gets me excited, especially in the level of games, the fidelity of games that we have nowadays, these massive open world games, right? And just somewhere, someone will see that little thing that I did and be like, oh, look at that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love those. Funny. I love stumbling upon those. You know, my preferred game that I do play, you know, here and there is generally more like open world type stuff. And I love when you know, go into a shack and there's some reference to some other video game or some other movie or some other little thing that makes no sense for the game, but it's just a little nod from the creator, whoever designed that, to the player to be like, hey, I see you. I hope you like this. You know, like I love that, you know, and that's a real good sign for someone that, like you said, is doing their dream job and not just, you know, pushing buttons and you know, punching out type of thing, you know. That's really cool. So would you say, getting back to like the podcasting, like is there, do you find one, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but have you found some of those struggles like in an interview where you're like struggling to get the story going, or like getting, you know, where you feel like there's a bit of a, you know, you're not quite getting anything to sink your teeth into, like to, because you have your questions you want to ask, right? And hopefully they lead somewhere good, but you're just not quite getting what you want out of it, and how do you approach that if you have that feeling a few minutes in? This is advice for me. This isn't even for the podcast. This is for me.
That is a thing. It happens. Obviously, we won't name names, but I've had a few conversations where I've gotten the vibe that the guest really wasn't as into the discussion as I would hope them to be, and they weren't really as forthcoming with their stories, or they gave answers that weren't really conducive, right, to like sharing their story. Like they just kind of gave very shallow answers, and that, you know, it always goes back to how I think in my life and how I approach a lot of things. And I'm not perfect, by the way, of course. I'm only human. I'm not perfect. But when I'm able to be in those moments and something's not going the way I would hope it does, I can only do so much, right? I can only affect change on my level. I can't make them share something or more than what they're sharing. I can't make them as excited about the discussion as I am. So I will continue to approach the discussion with the same energy that I always do. Maybe I recalibrate a little bit to hopefully try and get it to a better spot. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And maybe it wasn't the best story, or maybe it wasn't the most intriguing discussion. I can walk away knowing that I tried to affect it the best way I could. And then I kind of, you know, during the edit or when I do a rewatch of it, maybe there's something I could have learned. In some cases there wasn't, but it was really me saying, you know what, I did my best. This person didn't really care to share more, or they weren't as engaged, and it is what it is. But I can say I did my best, and I think that's the part where I have to like draw the line in the sand and say, you know, I brought my best. For whatever reason it wasn't as amazing as maybe some of these other experiences.
Yeah.
But I tried, and then kind of dust it off, and then I get ready for the next one.
Yeah. You can't, it's like when you are, in terms of like game design, and yes, you have a team of people, but when you're designing, you're in complete control of what you're doing, more or less. You're not in control of the other person across from you, or online with you for a podcast. But I would tend to think, and this could be me projecting a little bit, that will happen less and less frequently as your skills as an interviewer improve. So I would imagine, that's more likely to happen in your first 10 or 15 podcasts than in your next 10 or 15, or in 100 through 120 or whatever it is as you move along, because part of that is the skill of the interviewer, bringing the energy. And I think everybody has something they want to talk about. You just have to find it. And being an introvert myself, I'm well aware of there's not a whole lot of topics I'm super interested in or want to talk about. So I can relate to both sides of this conversation, struggling to get something out of someone and being the person who someone will be struggling with, depending on what the conversation is.
It's very, and like you said, it's sometimes, I think in those moments I do and have wondered, is it just my inability to get a solid conversation going with this person? Maybe, but it's really me hoping that I've done my best, and it could be a teachable moment, as mentioned here in chat. It could be something that I could have learned from, and in some of those cases it was certainly, what could I have figured out, right? What could I have, or how could I have approached it differently? And maybe in a couple cases, which is true, I've seen, like I pointed out earlier, I'd see a moment where I could have asked a follow-up that would have been fantastic in that moment. Didn't get there in that time, and hindsight's 2020, so I can only look at that moment and say, okay, next time that happens, I will try my best to maybe tug on that thread a little bit more. But yeah, it's really about trying to just bring my best forward every time. And if I'm in a situation that doesn't feel like it's probably the best, I do what I can, and if it's beyond my control, it's beyond my control. And so, it's
very stoic right there. Very stoic. If it's beyond my control, it's beyond my control. And that's
I mean, not every episode of Crossing the Streams is gonna be perfect. Not every episode's gonna be a 5-star episode. I that would be amazing if it was. I know that's not the world that I live in.
No, and that's because you're not necessarily at 100% on every one of yours, on your end. It's you're not 100%. Your guest is not 100% necessarily. You both might miss cues in the conversation, or the energy level doesn't vibe. All you can do is try to learn from it and be better the next time.
Be better the next time, and that's just always been at the core of everything I do. It took me a really long time to get there. In the many years of content creation, the many years of game design and game development, I do consider myself a recovering perfectionist, in that I always want things to be amazing right off the bat. I always want to be great at what I do. I always want to be better than other people at things. I'm super competitive. But over the years, I found that it really, yes, maybe I want to have a really stellar episode of Crossing the Streams, but then where will we go next? How will it get better? Obviously, there's places to go. There's better ways to do things, and I think that hopefully by going from episode 1 with Amish Ace to episode whatever with whoever, you can say, wow, the difference between these two episodes and the caliber of the storytelling and the discussion and even the editing has come such a long way, whatever that is, whether it's from episode 1 to episode 53 where we're at. And, you know, if that's the last episode that somehow gets made, I can still walk away and say, I did so much better in that last episode. There's always something to learn. There's always ways to get better. And that's all I'm after, is just even a little bit more. If I could get a little bit better at what I do, I think it serves the quality of the content, and hopefully serves the greater purpose of telling these stories of these amazing other creators, as well as getting the word out about them. So
that's I mean, that's all you can hope for, and truly an amazing attitude to have, even though sometimes it can be a struggle to fight those other impulses of being perfect or competing with others aside from yourself, you know.
Yeah.
So if you were willing to share, what do you have any concrete plans in the near future for Crossing the Streams or other content, that you have goals or some other thing that we can expect from you in the near future?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm working on right now that I am building off of that mission of highlighting other creators and getting their stories, or putting them in situations that you wouldn't ordinarily see them in, so you could just learn more about them. And so I'm working on a couple things. Crossing the Streams roundtable is a thing. We've done that a couple times, where I just bring a couple other creators on. We talk about a topic, a more specific topic, and so there are a few of those in the works, looking at things like, what was it like on the journey to become partner, or what is it
relevant.
like, very relevant nowadays, right? What is it like being a charity streamer, or focusing on charity? What is it like to have burnout and things like that? So there's a number of episodes that I've been planning and reaching out to previous guests or future guests to kind of bring them together, and in service of getting perspective on from these streamers and creators doing what they do, and kind of addressing those topics as a group, and feeling getting that understanding of where they're at and how they feel about whatever the topic might be. So that's the easy one to discuss and share. More of those are happening soon. There's also a couple other projects that I'm working on, where bringing more creator friends on to do things that are outside of their realm of Lego or makers and crafting, whether it's playing tabletop games with me, or other social party games that require some kind of discussion or deception or other things like that. So
that sounds like a lot of fun.
There's a lot of those plans that have been in the works for the last couple of weeks. I really am excited to get those going. They have a lot more moving parts, and so it's more of a slow burn getting those going.
Yeah,
but the hope,
one guess is hard enough, let alone, you know.
Well, yeah, one guess is hard enough. You multiply it by like 5, and then you just, maybe it'll happen, maybe who knows. But the idea is in service of the mission of Crossing the Streams, which is bringing on other creators, learning and hearing their stories, hopefully getting inspired a little bit, which has always been, I think, the North Star for that content. And now I hope to expand it.
That's awesome. It's been a great chat. Where can people new to MoreAmor find your podcast and your other content?
Absolutely. The podcast itself you could search for. It's a little hard to find, given Crossing the Streams is a popular title. So you could you could do a search for Crossing the Streams and then add MoreAmor to it. You'll find it that way on all the major podcast platforms. Or you could go to youtube.com/MoreAmor, and then you'll find the full playlist for Crossing the Streams, as well as links to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. You can also find me, of course, on twitch.tv/MoreAmor, Instagram.com/more_amor, TikTok. I'm out there. You can find me. You can find me. And I'm again, the goal is to highlight other creators, give some perspective on their inspiration, hopefully get you inspired too.
Well, you've already inspired me, so good luck with all of that, and I just wish you nothing but continued success.